Lenora never wanted a stepbrother, and Elias never wanted a sister, at least not in the way a brother should. Lenora Hayes had always been close to her mother, Vivian. It had just been the two of them for years, and while life wasn't perfect, it was manageable. That changed when Vivian met Gregory Finch, a well-off businessman who seemed like the perfect man. He was charming, generous, and, most importantly, promised to give them a better life. Within months, Vivian and Gregory were married, and Lenora was forced into a new home, a new family, and an unfamiliar world that would become her worst nightmare. Gregory had a son, Elias, who was just a year older than Lenora. At 17, he was tall, lanky, and had an unsettling presence. He wasn't openly rude or aggressive, but there was something about him that made Lenora uneasy. Maybe it was the way he rarely spoke, only offering short responses when asked, a question, or perhaps it was his cold, unreadable eyes that lingered on her for too long. Lenora tried to ignore the feeling, telling herself that adjusting to a new sibling was always awkward, but the uneasiness never went away. Moving into Gregory's house was another shock. It was much bigger than their old apartment, a 2-story house with modern furniture and expensive decorations. But despite its elegance, it felt cold, empty. Vivian was happy, though, and that was what mattered, or at least that was what Lenora told herself. Vivian was in love, convinced that Gregory was the answer to their financial struggles. She doted on him, cooked for him, laughed at his jokes, and brushed aside any concerns Lenora had. The first few weeks were strange, but peaceful. Elias mostly kept to himself, either in his room or out somewhere. He barely spoke to Lenora, which she was fine with. But little things began to happen that made her question if she was imagining things. She would feel his eyes on her when she wasn't looking, only for him to glance away the second she turned. His footsteps would echo behind her in the hall, a little too close for comfort. Once, she woke up in the middle of the night and swore she saw a shadow moving past her bedroom door, but when she checked, there was nothing. She told herself it was just her imagination. The first real incident happened about a month after moving in. Lenora was coming out of the bathroom when she nearly collided with Elias in the hallway. He didn't move, didn't step aside to let her pass. Instead, he just stood there, staring down at her, his expression unreadable. An awkward silence stretched between them before he finally stepped back, but not before giving her a slow, almost thoughtful smirk. She hurried past him, heart-pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. It was the first time she truly felt afraid of him. She tried telling her mother about it, but Vivian dismissed her concerns, laughing it off as teenage awkwardness. "He's just shy," she said. "Give it time. You'll get along eventually." Lenora wanted to believe that, but something inside her knew better. Things escalated in small but unsettling ways. Elias would stand too close behind her when they were in the kitchen. She'd find her bedroom door slightly open when she was sure she had closed it. He started making casual comments about her, how she looked, how she walked, even how she smelled. It was never outright inappropriate, but it was enough to make her skin crawl. The worst moment came one evening when their parents had gone out to dinner, leaving them alone in the house. Lenora stayed in her room trying to focus on her homework, but a strange noise caught her attention. A faint creaking, like someone shifting their weight just outside her door. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the door, waiting, then silence. After what felt like hours, she forced herself to move, to check if he was really there. She opened the door just a crack, her heart hammering, and saw nothing. The hallway was empty, but as she closed the door and turned back toward her bed, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The closet door. It was open. She was sure she had closed it that morning. A chill ran down her spine as she realized something terrifying. Elias had been in her room. Elias was smart in a way that made Lenora feel trapped. He never did anything outright aggressive, nothing that could be used as proof against him, but his presence was suffocating. He was always there, always watching, always making sure she knew that he controlled the space around her. He had a way of making her feel small, powerless. And worst of all, no one else seemed to notice. Gregory and Vivian saw Elias as the perfect son, polite, responsible, mature. He did well in school, stayed out of trouble, and never raised his voice. Meanwhile, Lenora found herself being painted as the difficult one. Anytime she was frustrated or upset, Elias would step in, acting calm and composed, subtly making it seem like she was overreacting. He knew how to twist situations in his favor when she complained about him invading her space. Her mother simply told her she was being dramatic. When she expressed discomfort, Gregory reassured her that Elias was harmless. "He's just quiet," he said. "You two will bond eventually." But Lenora didn't want to bond with Elias. She wanted distance, and no one would give it to her. Elias became bolder as time passed. He found small ways to touch her, his hand brushing against hers when passing her something at the dinner table, his shoulder pressing against her when they walked past each other in the hall, his fingers trailing across her back when no one was looking. It was never enough to call out, never obvious enough for anyone else to notice, but Lenora felt it every time. It made her stomach twist with unease. The worst part was that Elias made sure she had nowhere to turn. He slowly chipped away at her relationships. He'd tell Vivian that Lenora was being disrespectful, that she was distant and moody. He'd make little comments in front of Gregory about how she was always sneaking off, making it seem like she was hiding something. He created a version of her that made it harder for her to be believed, so that when she finally did try to tell someone, they'd already have doubts in their minds. Her mother started snapping at her more, growing impatient with what she saw as her bad attitude. Gregory was never cruel, but there was always a look of mild disappointment in his eyes, as if he expected better from her. The more she resisted Elias, the more isolated she became. He was pulling the strings, and Lenora was just his puppet. One evening, she was studying in the living room when Elias sat down beside her on the couch. He was too close, as usual, but she ignored him. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there in silence. Then, after a few minutes, he leaned in slightly. "You should try being nicer to me," he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. His tone was light, almost amused, but there was something menacing beneath it. "It would make things easier for you." She stiffened, her hands tightening around her textbook. Every muscle in her body told her to run, to get away, but she forced herself to stay still. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. That night, she locked her bedroom door. She had never done it before, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, every nerve in her body on edge. She wanted to believe she was just being paranoid. Then she heard it, a quiet, shuffling sound, footsteps, someone outside her door. She held her breath, gripping her blankets tightly. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the doorknob rattled. A cold wave of fear crashed over her. She sat up, staring at the door in horror. The handle twisted back and forth, slow and deliberate. Someone was testing the lock. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the noise stopped. The footsteps moved away. The house fell silent again. Lenora sat awake for hours, too afraid to sleep. When morning came, she unlocked her door and peeked into the hallway. It was empty. Everything looked normal, but she knew the truth. Elias had tried to get into her room. Lenora's body felt different, It started with exhaustion, waves of tiredness that made it hard to get through the day. Then came the nausea, creeping up on her at random moments, forcing her to rush to the bathroom. She chalked it up to stress, at first. After all, she had every reason to be on edge. Living under the same roof as Elias felt like being trapped in a cage with a predator. She barely slept, barely ate. Of course, her body would start breaking down, but then her period was late. A week passed, then 2. Panic settled in her chest like a heavy weight. The thought of pregnancy seemed impossible, ridiculous even. She had never been with anyone. There was no way. And yet the signs were all there. One afternoon, when she was home alone, she forced herself to take a test. Her hands shook as she waited for the results. When the second line appeared, dark and unmistakable, the world seemed to tilt. Pregnant. Her mind refused to process it. She read the instructions again, as if that would change anything. Her breathing came in sharp, uneven gasps. No, this couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. Memories she had buried clawed their way to the surface. That night, weeks ago, the one she had tried so hard to forget. She had woken up feeling strange, groggy, as if she had been drugged. Her body had felt sore in ways she couldn't explain, her clothes slightly out of place. She had convinced herself it was nothing, that she had imagined it. But now she knew the truth. Elias had done something to her while she was unconscious. Wave of nausea hit her, but this time, it had nothing to do with pregnancy. She staggered to the sink and vomited until there was nothing left. Then she collapsed onto the bathroom floor, gasping for air. She had to tell someone. Her mother? No. Vivian had never believed her before. She had brushed off every warning, sign, dismissed every concern. Lenora could already hear her response. Elias wouldn't do something like that. You're being dramatic. No, she couldn't go to her. The police? What proof did she have? There were no witnesses, no physical evidence. It was just her word against his. She felt trapped, more trapped than she ever had before. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting over her stomach. There was something growing inside her, something she never wanted, something that shouldn't exist. A constant, inescapable reminder of what had been done to her. Elias hadn't acted any differently. He still watched her with that unreadable expression. Still, found ways to invade her space. Had he been waiting for her to figure it out? Did he already know? Lenora needed answers. She waited until the house was silent, then crept down the hall to Elias's room. The door was locked, but she had stolen a spare key weeks ago, preparing for a moment like this. Her hands trembled as she turned the knob and slipped inside. The room was neat, almost eerily so. No posters, no clutter. Just a bed, a desk, a single bookshelf. It was as if he had erased every trace of personality from the space. But she knew there had to be something hidden here, something that would confirm what she already knew. She started. With the desk drawers, sifting through papers, notebooks, random objects, nothing stood out. Then she opened the bottom drawer and froze. Inside was a collection of photographs. Of her. Some were normal. Pictures taken at family gatherings or school events, but others made her blood turn to ice. Photos of her sleeping. Of her walking down the hallway completely unaware. Of her in the shower, taken through the barely parted door. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. She flipped through them, her stomach twisting with horror. This was proof. Proof that he had been watching her for far longer than she realized. At the very bottom of the drawer was a small black notebook. She opened it, scanning the pages, each one worse than the last. Descriptions of her daily routines, her habits, even notes on how to manipulate her. But one page made her hands go numb. She belongs to me now. Lenora barely made it back to her room before she collapsed onto the floor, shaking. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't stay here. She had to get away before it was too late. Lenora knew she had to leave, but escaping wasn't as simple as just walking out the door. Elias was always watching. Every movement she made, every time she reached for her phone, every moment she was alone. It all felt like he was there, hovering just out of sight. But now, she wasn't just afraid. She was furious. The photos, the journal, the way he had stolen every part of her life. She wanted to scream, to throw the evidence in his face and demand to know why. But she couldn't. She had to be smart. If she confronted him, he'd deny everything. Worse, he might do something unpredictable. No, she needed a plan. She spent the next few days pretending nothing had changed. She still barely spoke to him, still kept her head down. But this time, it was a strategy. She needed him to believe she hadn't found his secrets, that she was still the same helpless girl he had spent so long controlling. Meanwhile, she was preparing. She started gathering evidence. She stole his notebook and hid it beneath her mattress. She borrowed an old phone from a friend at school, one that wasn't connected to her main number so she could make calls without Elias tracking them. She set up a hidden camera in her room, placing it inside an old stuffed animal on her dresser, just in case he tried to sneak in again. But the hardest part was pretending to be normal around Vivian and Gregory. Her mother still dismissed her concerns, brushing off her exhaustion and anxiety as mood swings. Gregory was even worse, looking at her with polite disinterest. They were useless to her now. If she was going to escape, she had to do it on her own. The perfect opportunity came one evening when their parents announced they were going out for a dinner party. Lenora acted indifferent, barely acknowledging them as they left. The second the front door closed, she went into action. She grabbed her backpack, already packed with essentials, money, clothes, the burner phone. Then she went to her mattress and pulled out Elias's notebook. She would take it with her as proof. She was almost to the door when she heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. She turned just in time to see Elias standing in the hallway, blocking the exit. His expression was different now, not calm, not smug. There was something dark in his eyes, something almost amused. "You weren't planning to go anywhere, were you?" he asked, his voice smooth, controlled. Lenora's heart pounded. She gripped the notebook tighter. He had figured it out. "Move," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. Elias didn't move. Instead, he took a slow step forward. "You went through my things," he said. Not a question, a statement. Lenora swallowed hard. "Yeah, and I know everything now." Elias tilted his head slightly, as if considering this. Then he smiled. "You know what's funny?" he said, stepping even closer. "You think you can just leave, like it's that easy?" Lenora's breath hitched as he reached for her. She reacted on instinct, shoving him back with all her strength. He stumbled, caught off guard, and that was all she needed. She bolted past him, sprinting for the stairs. She made it to the front door, but before she could unlock it, she felt him grab her from behind, yanking her backward. She screamed, thrashing wildly, kicking and clawing at him. He was stronger, but she was desperate. They crashed to the floor, struggling. Elias tried to pin her down, his hands wrapping around her wrists, but she fought like a wild animal. Her hand scrambled for something, anything, until her fingers closed around the small metal object in her backpack. Scissors. Without thinking, she swung her arm up. The blade sliced through the air and into his thigh. Elias let out a strangled yell, his grip loosening. Lenora didn't wait. She scrambled to her feet and ran, throwing the door open and sprinting into the street. She ran blindly, barefoot, her lungs burning. She didn't stop until she reached a neighbor's house, pounding on the door until someone answered. A middle-aged woman stared at her, wide-eyed, and before she could say anything, Lenora gasped out the words that would change everything. "Call the police." The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights painting the quiet suburban street in streaks of red and blue. Lenora stood on the neighbor's porch, shaking, her breath coming in uneven gasps. The moment she saw the officers step out of their car, she felt her knees weaken. It was over. She was finally safe. But as they approached her, a new kind of fear settled in. Would they believe her? Would they listen? She forced herself to speak, her words tumbling out too fast, her voice raw with panic. She told them everything, about Elias, about the photos, about the night she had woken up feeling strange. She held up the stolen notebook, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages, showing them the evidence of his obsession. One of the officers gently guided her to the back of the squad car, speaking in a calm, measured voice. "We're going to take you somewhere safe," he assured her. "Just breathe." But before they could drive away, another officer radioed in from the house. "We found the suspect inside," the voice crackled over the radio. "He's injured but conscious." A lump formed in Lenora's throat. Elias. He was still there, still alive. A small part of her had hoped he would have disappeared, run away, vanished into the night like the monster he was. But no. He was inside, probably already crafting a new lie, a way to twist the story in his favor. Vivian and Gregory arrived soon after, their faces a mix of confusion and horror. Her mother rushed to her side, bombarding her with frantic questions. "What happened? Why are the police here? Lenora, what did you do?" Lenora stared at her mother, something inside her breaking. Even now, Vivian assumed the worst of her. She didn't ask if she was okay. Didn't ask what had been done to her. One of the officers stepped in before she had to answer. "Your daughter has provided evidence of a serious crime," he explained. "Your stepson is being taken into custody for questioning." Vivian's face twisted in disbelief. "Elias? No, that's ridiculous. He wouldn't," Gregory interrupted, his voice low and firm. "Vivian, stop!" She turned to him, stunned. Gregory looked pale, his jaw tight. "They wouldn't be here if there wasn't a reason." For the first time, Lenora saw doubt flicker in her mother's eyes. But she didn't care anymore. It didn't matter whether Vivian believed her now. She had the truth. She had proof. Lenora was taken to the hospital for an examination. The sterile white walls, the harsh fluorescent lights, it all felt distant, like she was floating outside of her body. She answered questions in a daze, let the doctors perform their tests, barely reacting as they confirmed what she already knew: she was pregnant. The reality of it settled in her chest like a stone. This wasn't just something she could run from. It was inside her, changing her body, forcing her to face the truth over and over again. In the days that followed, everything moved in a blur. Elias was officially charged. His DNA was taken. The tests confirmed what she had been too afraid to admit. He was the father. There was no way he could deny it now. The case gained attention quickly. People whispered, speculated, tried to make sense of the horror that had unfolded in their quiet neighborhood. Vivian refused to speak to the media, but Gregory did. He expressed his devastation, his shock, his disbelief. "I had no idea," he admitted in a shaky voice. "If I had known..." But it was too late for ifs. Lenora cut ties with her mother soon after. Vivian had stood by Elias for too long, refused to see the truth when it was right in front of her. There was no coming back from that. Gregory, on the other hand, made it clear that he wanted to support her in any way he could. It was ironic, really. She had never been close to him before, but in the end, he was the only one who truly seemed to care. The choice about the pregnancy was hers, and hers alone. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, but in the end, she knew what she had to do. She wouldn't carry the weight of Elias's crimes for the rest of her life. She wouldn't let him have that kind of control over her future. Months passed. The case went to trial. Elias showed no remorse, no guilt. He stared at her from across the courtroom, expression blank, as if none of it mattered. But it did matter. And for the first time in a long time, Lenora realized she was free.